Now, this is the Murdoch scum. Now, is there any sign of the covering? Anything to do with the pandemic? They've got a sign there. Very small indeed. And the main thing is about, of course, what sells. It is the kind of latest lying for Brenda's son. And the whole paper is full of absolutely unbelievable kind of indulgence in pornography and sex. And only in 10 and 11 pages, 10 pages, 10 and 11 are given to their latest propaganda for Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. And the kind of backhanded confession that Johnson is unfit for purpose. There is a spread on the editorial page headed, "Police chiefs get him wrong, politicians are confused. How are you on those baffling rules?" Now, this is again making excuses for the cons. And there are other diversions, the completely criminally negligent, irresponsible, and corrupt disinformation from the Murdoch scum. And the Sun say that the Times says the 2 millions lost to 2 billion pounds lost to criminals in Fala cash fraud. Now that is another cheeky kind of lying, because the main fraudsters are the Conservatives, and the billions, the £1 trillion public sector borrowing means that hundreds of billions are being pocketed by the Conservatives and cons and assorted con supporting liars. And then they're saying that the ministers to move north as part of civil service shake-up. Now, is that what the people of the north want? Is that what they need? Do they want liars to be located in their kind of part of England? Whereas what they need is the support that the liars are denying them. So that's a typically kind of dishonest and dishonestly, quote, edited Times. And there is more promotion plugged for Boris Johnson under the headline that Johnson criticizes trace efforts amid warnings of 90,000 cases a day, and then £12 billion to keep trains and buses running. Speed of Farla scheme left it open to abuse, say auditors. So there is a completely contradictory and dishonest kind of array of so-called news, which is not cover, but covering up the conservatives' failures and negligence and corruption and cruelty and criminality. And then there is a piece about Oxford scientists who will be apparently rewarded for saving the world. And on page 14, there is a news about Germany, which is Berlin braces for lockdown as Christmas market is shut. And Spain is told that it's time for drastic measures. And Belgium's former prime minister is receiving intensive care. And France extending night curfew to 70% of the population. What this is showing, if that is a representative sample of the news from across the Western Europe, is that these countries, the so-called democracies and the so-called kind of advanced countries, developed countries, and all the other garbage, these have not been developed. These have not been kind of democratic. These have not been accountable, sensitive, or caring for their, quote, citizens. And it's UK is one of them, but the others are the same. And of course, the case of the USA is absolutely extreme because it is the world's leader of democratic world, and it is the leader of the democratic fraud. And on page 23 of the Times, there is a very, very rare kind of headline and an item. Racist police called part of the office African corner. I mean, we said a few days ago that the Metropolitan Police never send mixed race police staff to incidents. They're always segregated. Most of the police in London are segregated, and most of them are sent in batches of single race. Mainly white police men and women are sent together, and the African or Asian ones are not sent as part of the mixed kind of police crews. So that is not something that the Times is going to be claiming is kind of original. This is something that has been going on for all the time, and there is not enough reporting of what goes on in the police force. And they're saying, the Times saying that the price of electric cars will rise because of COVID by £3,000. And the former sketch writer Anne Treneman is saying that police chiefs haven't got a clue about the tier rules. Now, the state of the kind of disarray and the pandemonium that is exposed around the Boris Johnson fronted cabal shows that the police haven't got a clue about anything else either. It's not just the police. The entire kind of system or the collection of agencies, government agencies, local councils, government departments are completely unprepared for delivering the service that the slogans have said they were delivering for decades. And it seems that the husband of Boris Johnson's recruit, the Darwinian Allegra Stratton, who is a political editor, described as political editor of The Spectator, is making waves for Boris Johnson, because it is clear every day, getting clearer every day, that the electoral prospects of Donald Trump are kind of declining. So they're making a diplomatic way for the Times to drop a line suggesting that Boris Johnson is going to be successful because he's so efficient and so good at things that he is going to make friends with Joe Biden in the USA. And here is a I newspaper saying COVID cases up to 90,000 a day and test and trace can't cope. So what is the purpose of giving Dido Harding 12 billion pounds for test and trace? What is the purpose of this test? There is no answer, of course, but this is why the newspapers are completely failing to do the reporting. They're not reporting. They are misreporting and faking it. All these papers, how many of them influence students? These papers involve combined personnel, whether they're working remotely or from a central kind of office. There are literally altogether several thousand kind of staff involved in the production of these so-called newspapers, and they're not producing news. News by definition has to be new, original, and not kind of paste up kind of pieces from the, or pasted up pieces from the various other organs or sources. And Martin Bashir is unwell. Martin Bashir is the one that made a splash and made a career by staging that interview with Diana, who said to him that 3 is a crowd, meaning Camilla was the third person who was making it a crowd. And there's a piece by Michael Day, apparently quoting Donald Trump, saying that I will apologize in the distant future if I am ever wrong. Of course, he's not ever wrong. He doesn't know what right or wrong is. That is the whole point. He will never apologize, and distant future sums it up. That will be never. MP. They're saying in the kind of Daily Star, that MPs snub England star's plea to feed hungry children. But guess what's on their subsidized menu? And there is a long piece about subsidized menu for members of parliament. And there is a petition, of course, going around that calls for the scrapping of the subsidy for MPs. But this is the joke territory. The Fleet Street is doing a kind of joke journalism. And as of the police, look at this. Police are in a farcical kind of state of knowledge. Now, this is not some one-off thing in one paper. It's all over the place. Almost every organ is reporting some aspect of police being clueless. And there is an editorial in this edition of the Star which condemns members of parliament having subsidized restaurant. From fiddling expenses to taking seedy backhanders, British political history is littered with examples of foul play. Really. But that should be available as part of the evidence-based coverage of the foul play every day, every issue of the papers. But they don't cover that. This is only coming into focus as a kind of exchanging kind of denials between the supporters of the campaign to have free school meals for the children and those who oppose such demand and call. And this is like an internal game going on between Johnson and Sunak. The Financial Times gets it right, but it doesn't say what I'm saying, but this is the interpretation. It says, the headline says, the Sunak triples aid package with pledge of 11 billion in extra support. Now, this is coming in the very week that Johnson is being accused of being absolutely cruel and everything. But the shocking thing is that Sunak's headline hides the truth that he too opposed poor children getting the free school meals. So this is a completely falsely exaggerated diversionary headline, giving him credit for something he doesn't deserve credit for. And there is a second piece in the Financial Times, which is so interesting. It says the City of London law firms hit in talent bidding war as the United States rivals pay £130,000 for starters. Now that will be something that we can have a whole series of programs about. What is it that the lawyers or licensed law traders get £130,000 for starters for? What is it that they contribute? What is the secret? And we cannot begin to kind of dissect this lying promotion for the lying law traders in this space. We shall have to devote a longer series of diagnostic pieces examining the lying trade called the licensed law traders. And here is a confession. This is a confession, although they're not acknowledging it, but this is directly aimed at rebutting and exposing Johnson over the snub his snub of Greater Manchester and the Northwest and the Northeast. This headline in Financial Times says, Sunak, the UK Finance Minister, changes tack to encourage retention of low-paid employees. Now, that is the line. Low-paid employees are among the most hard-hit kind of people, victims of the Johnson attacks on the Greater Manchester area and the Northeast and the Northwest. So it's a war that is fully ongoing between Sunak and Johnson. And there is a kind of similar theme across the globe, where on page 6 of the Financial Times it says that there are calls for richer countries, well, nations. Well, the UK is not a nation, it is a kind of collection of nations, if you like. So the term nation has to be changed by something that is more accurate. But with that interpretation and explanation and clarifier, here is the headline in the Financial Times. Rich nations face calls to subsidize COVID-19 vaccine price for poor. Now, it's not about the vaccine price, it's about the whole kind of idea of so many people being in poverty, left in poverty, that needs addressing. And that is not what the Financial Times is willing to acknowledge. And there is a lazy kind of piece in the Financial Times about the kind of unintended or strategic merger or kind of unification in tactics between Google and Microsoft. But that is a kind of well-known criminal ploy that is adopted by monopolies and duopolies, and that is what is going on there. And the completely shameless, poisonous liar, Daily Express, manages to show Sunak and Johnson as united, not only united, but as united defenders of the country. Complete rubbish, absolute lies. And there is a prediction by an ex-aide of Donald Trump that he may still pull off a victory in the November election, which they say is a nightmare victory. But it is still possible. And there is a kind of unintended confession that £7.8 billion will be lost for vital research due to the pandemic crisis. And another unintended headline, that a minister's aide, Caroline Ansell, has resigned her post because she supports the call for the free school meals for children. And Robert Maxwell's daughter Ghislaine says that she never introduced Andrew to Epstein. And Frederick Forsyth is writing a patriotic piece here that Brexit grit. Boris needs Brexit grit to tackle the virus, which is again overestimating and overstating the positive impact of Brexit. And the Boris Graph again is running a piece promoting the conservative cabal with a headline that has got a higher amount than the other papers. 13 billion pounds to keep businesses alive, Chancellor to top up wages and offer grants to self-employed in tier 2 areas. And this will help avoid new national lockdowns, says Boris Johnson. Johnson warns that economy cannot count on vaccine coming to rescue, and all the other similar idiocies. We move now on to the local areas and the goings on in the two council areas in Newham and Tower Hamlets. The Newham Council or councillors passed a motion or kind of heard statements by various councillors claiming that they had been targeted by trolls, and a number of them have been sent threats, including one at least who has been sent death threats. So this is the online copy of the Newham Recorder coverage of the meeting last week. It is significant that Newham Council's meeting did not hear any evidence or evidence-based report or account or representation whatsoever about councillors lying to the electorate. The councillors, Newham councillors, lying to the electorate and refusing to engage on the evidence of their receiving no service or poor service or being violated in their various kind of entitlements by the Newham Council employees. Anyone watching this from the beginning of the last 3 months would have noticed that we have referred to this quite a few times in the last 3 months. And this is a cultural kind of thing that is allowed by the Newham Council. And the fact that Roxana Fiaz is claiming that there will be a referendum on whether to keep the mayor system or to scrap it amounts to her delivering on her promise that she would give an opportunity to electors on the future of the elected mayor post. This is completely false and misleading. There have been demands for the scrapping of the mayor post in Newham. There have been demands for longer than Newham Council is admitting, or the corruptly misedited and stupidly edited Newham Recorder is reporting. There have been always evidence-based claims that Newham Council should not have an elected mayor because it is completely, the Newham Council's being a corrupt and incompetent and criminal and negligent council is made 100 times worse by the fact that there is no accountability when there is a mayor system in place. And the evidence of the last 2.5 years since Roxana Fiaz succeeded Robin Wales in May 2018 shows that all the councillors, without any exception, and that is going by the record, published records, we don't know what they actually communicate, if they communicate on this among themselves, but the public and publicly accessible evidence shows that in the last 2.5 years since Roxana Fiaz became the kind of holder of the post of elected mayor, no councillor has made any kind of attempt to seriously share any thoughts about how bad the mayor system is for the ordinary people, individuals, families, groups, and the overall electors in the borough of Newham. So it is impossible to see how, only because there will be a kind of token, kind of attempt at giving people a chance to say whether the mayor system should stay or not, that they will actually be allowed to vote it out to scrap it, to vote to scrap it. It is quite possible the Newham Council is manipulated, and Roxana Fiaz's misleadership will manipulate the public, and the Newham Recorder, the only local so-called newspaper, will collude and collaborate and be complicit in the corruption of the process so that the mayor system stays. Because in the last 2.5 years, the Newham Recorder has not published a single letter. The Newham Recorder has not published a single letter from a single councillor on Newham Council sharing any insights into what is going on inside the council. And the so-called full council meetings in Newham are complete, absolute charades and lies. Now, that is the general statement. The other serious problem with these councillors is that despite the fact that some of them claim to have been formally educated, including some who appear to be kind of familiar with, quote, the licensed legal system, there is not a single councillor in Newham or on Newham Council currently who can be expected to make an articulate statement lasting 10 minutes about anything. It's a very poor quality of councillors intellectually. And the same applies to Tower Hamlets. Tower Hamlets Council is as corrupt as Newham Council. So there is no real contest between Tower Hamlets and Newham. Both are equally corrupt. And the corruption is not made any worse or any less by any available recourse against the crooks, either crooked councillors or crooks in posts as employees, directors and others who overpaid. Too many employees in the councils are paid too much money. If that is compared with the amount of arrears that the eviction applications kind of cite as urgent evidence why a particular tenant who is shown as having incurred rent arrears, then the amount of money paid to these directors and the allowances that the councillors are paid, there is no comparison because the arrears are too small amounts. Whereas the small amounts are being used to penalize somebody and make them homeless, deny them of basic human rights to housing. And none of the council meetings that have been held since Roxana Fiaz got in May 2018 has actually discussed any of these issues. And I'm talking most of the time before the COVID-19 appeared in the UK, most of the time Roxana Fiaz kind of wasted by diversionary propaganda beats. She has not changed anything. The only thing she has done is that she has used her name instead of Robin Wells's name while continuing the same corruption and illegality. And she has used a formula that of blaming the previous administration for everything that is wrong with Newham Council. And whenever she has done that, no councillor has come out of the hiding and challenged her. So when she said on the 12th of March 2018, days before she was formally declared as the Labour Party's candidate for mayor at the 2018 mayor election, she said that Newham had always been a Labour stronghold. What she meant was that it was a dictatorship. It was a corrupt dictatorship and there was no accountability. Nobody had any say against the corrupt criminal clique that held control in the name of the Labour Party, in the name of the borough, in Newham. And the two MPs are as corrupt as the councillors. The two MPs are as complicit as the councillors. And all of them are as corrupt as Rukhsana Fiaz. And that criticism is fact-based. It's not opinion, it is fact-based. And the same thing applies to John Biggs in Tower Hamlets, who is the diminutive, that is the tiny sized, tiny statured occupant in the post of so-called elected mayor at the expense of the people of Tower Hamlets. High-rise buildings are going up, despite the fact that Biggs and the corrupt clique that carries out the corruption along with him in Tower Hamlets, in the name of Tower Hamlets, got a lot of undeserved favorable publicity and propaganda during the last 5-6 months over Dirty Desmond's West Ferry Road old printworks development or degeneration of housing, and Robert Jenrick's overriding the objection, the corruptly staged and bogus objection by Tower Hamlets Council to that particular stage of the planning application by Dirty Desmond. It was corruptly staged objection because they wanted a bargain. They wanted more money from the Dirty Desmond. This is the completely unjustified kind of ground for saying no to a planning application. Because planning is supposed to be about the environment, about the amenities that are affected or are brought into being or are obstructed by a planned project. And amenities should include the needs of the people, local people, to housing that this particular degeneration project would build and construct under the planning application if it went ahead. So what the Tower Hamlets Council instead does and has been doing for very many years is it says no to the original planning application. And what it does is it gets a headline saying the council is rejecting particular application. And it comes across as if it is representing the local community's views and interests and rights and needs. It is not doing anything of the sort. What it is doing and what the small group of planning kind of section officials are doing is kind of engaging in the ritual acts of criminality that they have been indulging in and have been perpetrating for decades. Successive occupants in those posts have been criminals. Criminals, look it up, as defined in the textbook. Doing wrong, intentionally doing wrong. And those criminals have now given permission to the high-rise development or degeneration in Limehouse area. And the Greater London Assembly has got a rare kind of appearance in the news about Tower Hamlets, where its planning chair, who is a conservative, has objected to that development being granted by, or that degeneration being granted by Tower Hamlets Council. Now, why do these people get away with this criminality? How do they do it? Why is it that the Khoodeelaar campaign alone is pointing this out, noticing these serious discrepancies and violations, illegalities and criminalities? Isn't there anyone else in the borough who has got the sense to understand the wrongs being done by the council or undercover or covers of the local council and local planning kind of remit? The answer is there are many people who are colluding with the corruption and the criminality. They understand exactly the wrongs of that they're doing, but that is because they are criminals. They understand, but they're criminals. Their character is immoral and they are unethical and they're complete crooks. Think about that. Now take all these to any other council, say for example the council in Croydon, which you mentioned earlier today. Croydon is one of the worst and the most corrupt councils to be found, identified publicly anywhere in England. And the reference is to the kind of fortnightly publication, Private Eye, and their latest kind of contents and copy about Croydon's criminality. It doesn't call it criminals because the Private Eye, as misedited by Ian Hislop, is itself a corruptly run operation. Its veneer, its surface, its appearance is that of a critical kind of third party. It's not part of the media, but it is. For example, it doesn't use words like corruption, crooks, criminals, thieves. It does use about the libel kind of law firm, Carter Ruck, the swear word. But that's it. It doesn't really use anything kind of original and truthful to describe criminal MPs, criminal ministers, criminal councillors, criminals, collectives operating as councils. So that is the introduction to what the Private Eye latest edition, which is dated today, from today to the 5th of November, and the issue number is 1533. And it says about Croydon, about which Private Eye has been publishing quite regular kind of pieces. So in the Rotten Boroughs, on page 21 of this issue, it says more level-headed casualties at the London Borough of Croydon. Now this is a kind of bid at being kind of sarcastic and ironic and humorous and subtle. This is something that the Private Lie completely fails in getting across successfully. It's being clever. I mean, it's not meaning high levels. More high-level casualties at the London Borough of Croydon, following the departure of Chief Executive Joe Negrini. I mean, that word, they made it up, Negrini, it should have been too greedy. But Private Eye is too timid and too stupid to carry off a proper kind of alternative name depicting the actual crimes. And it is not funny to call Negrini Negridi. It doesn't really convey anything. The only way it could convey the greed and the corruption and the criminality on the part of Negrini would be to call her too greedy. Anyway, the first Simon Hall and then Tony Newman announced that they were standing down as cabinet members of finance and council leader respectively. But that is again false, because they are not. And there are millions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds kind of referred to in there. And on the other item about Ealing Council, they are doing something new for the first time. This guy who does the Rotten Boroughs is himself very timid and very kind of unenlightened, uninformed, and no sign of commitment against crooks and criminals in the councils. I mean, we have discussed his role before, and we shall be expanding on it in a special edition in due course. Now, they've got similar things about Ealing Council telling lies to the kind of London ambulance service about the scrapping of traffic through various streets in Ealing. But they're failing to say that this is happening in Hackney, this is happening in Tower Hamlets and in Islington as well. And there is no really comprehensive kind of policy deficit account or undemocratic kind of behavior account or survey in this piece. So private eye, as we have said, kind of tickles these councillors and councils. It doesn't really expose them. It doesn't really name them and shame them really. And that is why the piece in October, the last week of October, literally days before the October 2010 so-called election, to the post of the mayor, so-called in Tower Hamlets, Private Eye ran a piece about Halal Abbas, and it called him dead meat, and it was based on the disastrous kind of dossier that Abbasuddin Halal had submitted on his behalf to the Labour Party's then NEC against Lutfur Rahman. That was a one-off, although it was connected with the fact that Private Eye itself had a particular agenda against Abbasuddin Halal because of his own record as having condemned Private Eye before. It wasn't something that was biting enough. It was biting enough just about, but it wasn't biting enough for the benefit of upholding honesty, accountability, and establishing democracy in Tower Hamlets. That's our goal. We are less concerned about the post of mayor, and we are more concerned about the absence of democracy, which is desperate case. Democracy must be established in Tower Hamlets. Of course, it must be established in every borough, but in this context, in the context of this discussion, Tower Hamlets Council is completely undemocratic. And we shall give a few minutes to the explanation, in addition to the fact that most councillors are literally idiots. And one of the reasons why all these idiots are selected by the Labour Party crooks and corrupt establishment as candidates for in the name of the Labour Party is because they're stupid. And in addition to that, they are immoral as well. Now, these are not the only idiots and immoral elements who are actually, by default, in charge of making anti-social, anti-democratic, and impoverishing decisions at the expense of the majority of the people in Tower Hamlets. But the Labour Party, which has got the absolute majority in Tower Hamlets, there is hardly any other party worth mentioning. There are probably 3 or 4 others, but they are not making any impact whatsoever. In any case, none of them is morally any different from the immoral collection of the Labour Party councillors, because all of them have been colluding with the post of mayor and have been lying in their various positions over the years. Those 4 are not exempt from equal condemnation that applies to the others, the majority, that blindly support the corrupt John Biggs, who is the incumbent in the post of the corrupt post of the mayor in the name of Tower Hamlets. Now, the Labour Party membership in Tower Hamlets is operated by serial crooks and liars. They don't care what the lying Biggs does, because it is Biggs who makes the decision, and the lying councillors collude with him. And the Labour Party so-called decision makers are as corrupt as the councillors. So we shall be looking at John Biggs's list of lies that we know we can actually demonstrate with evidence he lied in due course. But suffice to say that John Biggs, who has been given an oversized kind of image online today by the crook Mike Brook, the crook, or the Archant-owned East London idiotizer, is every week being given a completely false and falsified kind of credit for something that is totally banal and stupid. For example, today's one gives him credit, and he's got a bigger picture than he actually would have been in the camera, unless it was manipulated, the photograph. The reason or the pretext for which Mike Brook, the crook, has given this plug for Biggs is the so-called COVID-19 community champions. Have you ever heard anything so stupid? It's not anything that is original. This is something that most people do as decent human beings for their neighbors and the neighborhood. Apparently, Biggs has given money to community COVID champions. This is a pretext to get a publicity for this corrupt John Biggs. And there is no sign anywhere of any comparison, any actual traction based on reality of the failures of the council to deliver services that are absolutely essential. And there is no critical point about the latest high-rise building degeneration project that Biggs has given go-ahead to. The members of the Labour Party, who are Bangladeshis, are, generally, the majority of the members are recruited in the same corrupt way that they have always been. For example, when the Times newspaper, of all places, in December, I think in sometime in 1995, let's say, the Times newspaper published either it's 25th of December or 25th of some month in 1995, which is 25 years ago. Times newspaper published a piece about the corrupt recruitment of Labour Party members from Bangladeshis. And it was a piece that, if memory serves, it was a piece that was byline to Andrew Pierce. Andrew Pierce is now in the Daily Mail, has been in the Daily Mail, on the Daily Mail for a long time. So Andrew Pierce wrote a piece. And in that piece, it was revealed that one member of the party, who is now a former Labour Party councillor in Tower Hamlets, had their personal bank account used for paying the membership fees of a significant number of Labour Party members. And that was one typical, neat example of systematic corruption by the Labour Party members who posed as being representing the Bangladeshi community's interests. They never did. And there has never been any policy-based, ethics-based, morality-based, evidence-based behavior by any of these members who have taken a stand by risking their own career and position within the Labour Party to uphold the principle, uphold democracy, uphold accountability, and oppose corruption and criminality in the council, through the council, by the council. So this is all on the record here. So therefore, the Bangladeshis have not served the Bangladeshi community generally. So when Lutfur Rahman was paraded on the BBC in May 2014 as having had supporters who literally blocked the commercial road outside the Troxy in the commercial road near Limehouse, it should have explained that these people, most of them were kind of brought there during the night of the counting without them realizing what they were being brought to. And to this day, it is a question that needs answering. How did hundreds of Bangladeshis get into the middle of the road in Commercial Road on that night, a particular night in May 2014? What were they being told to go to see? What was it? And what did the kind of post of mayor of Tower Hamlets signify to them individually? What difference did it make to their kind of needs for council services and their other needs that needed protection and support from the locally democratically active council? Did they understand any of that? And if they didn't, who got them there? What was the line that was spread that got them there so fast on that night? This is the question that needs to be answered. And there is no suggestion, there is no indication in anything that Mark Ashdown said at the time or since. By since, I mean when the Greater London Assembly heard a kind of timid plea made by the opponents of Lutfur Rahman that the Metropolitan Police failed to investigate and prosecute anyone connected with the corruption that Lutfur Rahman benefited from, and Lutfur Rahman was accused of having used to get in at that 2014 election to the post of mayor. And that is the biggest issue. What is going on in Tower Hamlets? Why is the ordinary meaning of crime and criminality and fraud and corruption being suspended by the police? And what is the role of the Labour Party? And what is the role of the Conservative Party's resident kind of so-called campaigner, Peter Golds? What is his position against criminality and racism? Because he's a racist, so he won't be against racism. But what about criminality, general criminality, attached to the post of mayor and attached to the incumbent in the post of mayor? What role did he think the Pickles commissioners played in enhancing accountability in Tower Hamlets or in entrenching corruption and criminality in Tower Hamlets? These are the questions that only this campaign is bringing to you in the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. Suffice to say, none of the media is ever going to report any of this. So that is the kind of power of the exclusive, unique dedication to principle of the highest order, highest values of accountability, transparency. And we shall be continuing in the next edition.